I have a file full of letters that my father wrote to me, and I cherish these letters. I keep them right behind my desk, and this actually is a postcard that he sent. I realize text message, email, instant communication, we just hit send and our loved one gets the message. But I rather miss the discipline of writing a letter. No one is printing out text messages, but I read over some of these letters and the wisdom and the truth that my father sent to me, and sometimes even a postcard. I hold the postcard because today we are going to study a letter in the Bible that's really more like a postcard. We are looking at 3 John. It is so short. It could almost be entirely placed upon a single postcard. And what is the topic of this postcard? Well, the topic is friendship. This is perhaps the most personal of John's letters because he sends it to a dear friend. It's short, so let's see if we can tackle most of the verses. Starting in verse 1. The elder, to my dear friend Gaius. John refers to himself as the elder. I believe it's a reference to his age. He at this point is quite elderly. He says, to my dear friend Gaius. So this is a letter, a postcard written to a friend by the name of Gaius, whom I love in the truth. A few thoughts about friendship. First of all, we should love one another. He mentions repeatedly how much he loves Gaius. It says to my dear friend, but if I read it out of my Greek New Testament, it reads as follows: to Gaius, the agapo. Literally, agapo means the beloved. Dear friend isn't an adequate translation, but literally, the Greek says, to my beloved. In our friendships, we should have the closeness that we can say, I love you. I have dear friends who, even though they're guys and I'm a guy, it does not take any masculinity away from me to say to them, I love you. So we should love one another. And then you continue to read in verse 2, and he says, dear friend, in the Greek, agapo, beloved, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along. The second thing I would say to you is, in our friendships, we should pray for one another. And did you hear what he said? I pray that you will be as healthy physically as you are spiritually. There's a comparison. Back to my Greek. The Greek word is kathos. It's a word of comparison. I pray that you will be as healthy physically, kathos, as you are spiritually. What a wonderful thing to pray. Obviously, Gaius was very healthy spiritually. So John says, I pray that your physical health is just exactly the same as is your spiritual health. Here's my question. Would you want anybody praying that for you? I pray that your physical health is the same as your spiritual health. Because if you're spiritually sick, not walking with Jesus, you probably would not want someone to pray that. There was a woman had not been to church in 3 years, and I continued to try to get her to come back, to get right with God. And I would see her frequently in the place where she worked. One day I looked at her and I said, it's been 3 years. I'm going to start to pray that God will just make you miserable until you turn back to Him. And I walked out the door. This woman left the place of where she worked and is running across the parking lot trying to get to me before I reach my car. Pastor, please don't pray that. Please promise me you won't pray that. Well, it would be a lot easier if you would just get right with God. But here's a woman who never prayed, but boy, she believed in the power of my prayers. In our friendships, we should pray for one another. Third thing I would jot down is We should disciple one another. There should be a spiritual component to our friendship. Notice what he says in verse 3. It gives me great joy. It gave me great joy when some believers came and testified about your faithfulness to the truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. He's referring to Gaius. Obviously, that he was his spiritual child in the faith. And he says, nothing gives me more joy than to hear this report from believers who have told me how you are walking in the truth. To walk in the Bible, I meant to live in the truth. He's living the Christian life, and it brings him great joy. And that should be a part of the friendship as well. Do you ever talk about your relationship with Christ? And the Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. In a friendship, we should be spurring one another on to continue to walk with Christ and to live for Christ and to serve Christ. And the fourth thing I see is that we should support one another. See it in verse 5. Dear friend, agapo, my beloved, you are faithful in what you're doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they are strangers to you. They have told the church about your love. So please send them on their way in a manner that honors God. What is he talking about? Brothers and sisters who are strangers to you. Well, in this time, there would be traveling preachers. And as these itinerant ministers went place to place, it was important for the church to offer hospitality. There were not very many hotels or inns. The ones they did have were probably flea bitten. You would not want to stay there. So the church would practice hospitality. And he says, that's exactly what you've been doing for these traveling missionaries. You are supporting them. And he even says this in verse 6. Send them on their way in a manner that honors God. Well, let's look at our Greek New Testament. The word is asios. It means worthy. Send them on their way in a manner that is worthy of God. If you ever wonder when you write a tithe check or when you make an offering, if it's enough, just ask this question. Is this worthy of God? In this friendship, he said, you are serving you're supporting these traveling missionaries, showing hospitality, verse 8, so that we're actually working together. You may not be on the other side of the globe, but if your money is supporting the missionary who is there, actually you're working together with that missionary. I'm running out of time, but verse 9 sadly brings up a person by the name of Diotrephes. And this individual was not a friend. In fact, John says in verse 10 that he's going to have to confront him when he arrives. Diotrephes, who loves to be first. John said, I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes apparently tore it up. We might have had a fourth John were it not for this individual. There are occasions in a friendship that you have to have confrontations. Finally, in verse 13, he says, I have much more to write to you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we can talk face to face. Postcards are fine. Text messages, okay. But he concludes by saying, oh, I want to be with you face to face. And so maybe during this time you've been thinking about a friend in your life, someone that you're close to. Why don't you take some time to not only shoot the text over, but schedule lunch. Schedule face-to-face time with another believer, a dear friend who will make you a better Christian and a stronger in your faith, while you at the same time make them stronger as well.